Another violent attack at a federal immigration facility. 2 dead, including the sniper. Our Camilo Montoya Galvez talks to acting ICE Director Todd Lyons. Jimmy Kimmel is back, at times tearful. Kimmel denounced threats from the FCC, thanked conservatives who backed him, and hailed Erica Kirk's forgiving act of grace. Arizona Democrat Adalita Grijalva won her special election to the U.S. House, narrowing the GOP majority and increasing rank-and-file pressure to release the Epstein files. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. The sniper shot indiscriminately. The target, however, was not random. It was an immigration, customs, and enforcement facility in Dallas. The sniper positioned himself on a nearby rooftop and opened fire in what authorities described as a spray pattern. Bullets hit the facility and a nearby unmarked van. 3 people who were either ICE detainees or were there for ICE check-ins were wounded. 1 has died. 2 are in critical condition. The shooter, identified as 29-year-old Joshua John, died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The FBI revealed bullet casings found near the shooter. 1 carried an etching that read, "Anti-ICE." Authorities are still trying to determine definitively a motive, political or otherwise. This much we know. ICE reports a 1,000% increase in assaults on ICE personnel since President Trump took office in January. ICE doesn't specify the severity of assaults, and in some instances, charged offenses have revealed minor physical interactions, bumps and shoves. The majority of these instances, however, appear serious. For example, at that very same ICE facility in Dallas in late August, a man was arrested for issuing a bomb threat. Also in August, a protester in San Francisco was charged with slashing the tires of a government vehicle and threatening to stab a federal agent during an enforcement operation. On July 7th, a gunman opened fire at a Border Patrol facility in McAllen, Texas. 2 agents and a Border Patrol employee were injured. Authorities killed that gunman. That same month, a police officer was shot in the neck outside an ICE detention facility in Alvarado, Texas. Authorities described the shooting as a, quote, ambush. 10 suspects have been charged. The Trump administration touts its aggressive enforcement of existing immigration laws. That has provoked a backlash. But this violence constitutes a dangerous and worrisome pattern. Our Camilo Montoya Galvez just discussed this with Todd Lyons, who's the acting director of ICE. Camilo, what did he tell you?
Major ICE Director Todd Lyons told us that tragically 1 person who was in ICE custody this morning has tragically died. He also mentioned that 2 other detainees in ICE custody remain in critical condition as a result of the shooting. Let's take a listen to how the director described the shooting and how it unfolded.
The Dallas field office came under sniper fire today. Multiple rounds were fired into the building indiscriminately, into the lobby doors, the windows, various walls in the building, but also our sally port, which is where we bring in the secure location for detainees. The shooter fired indiscriminately into vehicles. The detainees were in the vehicle at the time. They weren't outside. There was no way you could have known detainees were in there. There were also officers from other agencies, other federal partners assisting us. 3 detainees were hit. 1, unfortunately, was killed. The sniper did commit suicide by a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
And Major, the director told us that he is also reevaluating and re-examining security measures at ICE facilities in light of the shooting.
And they believe, that is to say, the FBI, at least initially, this was targeted?
That's what the acting director told us. Director Lyons said that he believes this shooting was targeted at ICE agents in specific because he says that the shooter could not actually see the detainees who he says were inside of a vehicle when the shooting occurred. Let's take a listen to that exchange.
I feel that it was a definite targeted attack on ICE facility. You don't shoot out the windows. You just don't shoot at the random vehicles. You don't pick that location, a specific spot in Dallas, just to make a statement. You know, when you have anti-ICE rhetoric written on the bullets, you know who they're targeting. And then, you know, I wouldn't even say it's targeting against ICE, it's targeting against law enforcement.
And Major, the acting ICE director also told us that he believes the increased ICE rhetoric against ICE enforcement across the country is playing a role in this very tense environment, and he would like to see politicians, in his words, dial it down and understand, in his words, that ICE is trying to promote public safety, not to deteriorate public safety or separate families.
And Camilo, what did the acting ICE director say about the ability, or perhaps the inability that he worries about, to protect facilities and personnel on an ongoing basis?
Well, Major, he told us that nowadays he usually is now having to send multiple agents on what used to be routine operations, now in some cases to arrest one individual who is suspected of being in the country illegally. The agency is sending a dozen officials and agents to arrest that person. Before, those teams were limited to 6 or a handful of individuals, but the teams are getting bigger, not because the potential targets are posing a threat, in his words, Major, but because the situation during an arrest could escalate because of other individuals in the surrounding community, and they want to take precautions, especially in light of these deadly situations, Major.
Bringing back up beforehand, Camila Montoya Galvez with a very important interview. We thank you very, very much. Jimmy Kimmel returned last night. One of his funniest lines, reading a message he said was approved by Disney. It was about resubscribing to Disney Plus and Hulu. Well played. And yet about a third of the country, including the nation's capital, was blacked out due to decisions made by ABC affiliates owned by Nexstar and Sinclair. But we all know how to watch online. Late-night audiences have been gravitating in that direction for years. Kimmel's monologue soared there. More than 19 million views so far, and of course, still counting. Senior TV editor for Variety, Brian Steinberg, joins me now. Brian, it's great to have you with us. It doesn't matter if I think this is a moment. You're much closer to the industry and cultural trend lines in this country. Does it feel like a moment to you, Brian?
It does. And this is an unusual set of circumstances. Kimmel had to navigate his way through, a lot of pressures on both sides, politics, finances, culture, a lot of different stuff. And he seems to have prevailed.
And the president has said in response that he wants to sue ABC over this, believes a lawsuit would be even more lucrative. There aren't many legal bases for a lawsuit in this particular space, but that doesn't appear to deter the president rhetorically or otherwise.
Well, I think we're starting to see media companies shoulder up a little bit more. New York Times fought off a $15 billion lawsuit that may be refiled again. But yeah, I think the media companies are saying we did try to settle our way out of this before, but we're only being asked to do more and more. It's illegal. It's also in violation of a lot of American ideals and standards. So I think maybe we're starting to see a formation of a barrier start to build.
And Brian, what was the expectation within the TV watching world, meaning your professional world, for what Jimmy Kimmel might or might not do? And from your vantage point and those in the industry, how did the monologue and the show land?
Well, I think people want to see who's going to apologize out now. I think he was contrite without being obsequious, and he was defiant without being strident. He didn't try to offend and start a whole new cascade of accusations. He tried to explain himself, explain the value of what he does, and explain why he was trying to move forward. I think he seemed to have pulled it off last night, and you're seeing Nexstar and Sinclair with statements today saying they're discussing with ABC a way to kind of come back, which isn't as strident as they were a few days ago.
Does that suggest to you, Brian, some softening within Nexstar and Sinclair?
Sounds like there are discussions going on. I'm not sure how long Sinclair and Nexstar can do a preemption of a single show without some other basis, like a local disaster or news event, to make it being so. They have contracts in place that are supposed to be honored, and I think over time Disney could find another station to broadcast Kimmel, or even tell people in the area to go buy Hulu or Disney Plus and watch his show there.
Brian, it's plainly evident I'm no longer a young person, but when I was a young person, I watched a lot of late-night television. The demographics, however, are not the same as they were when I was young, and the audience has been trending against all late-night comedians for quite some time. They have tried with limited success to have a second life in the online world the next morning or midday the next day. What are the industry expectations for this particular kind of format and this particular kind of comedy?
Look, this format is under pressure. It is not like when Johnny Carson sat behind a desk at NBC and everyone in the nation who's going to watch that kind of show would watch him live or live to tape. There are more hosts, there are more options, there are fewer audiences watching at the time they're supposed to watch, 11:30, 12:30 in the morning. They can catch up later on, and then 24 hours later. So there is pressure on this format, which is actually a signature of American television. There's been a late night host trying to put people to sleep for decades. I think what's happened is in the recent years, there have been smaller audiences, fragmentation from Carson to Letterman and Leno to now multiple different hosts. And the hosts have gotten more political, more barbed, more outrageous, because that's what drives online chatter. So it is it's begun to hurt their stature and their status, certainly.
I appreciate the time, Brian. Thank you very, very much for joining me. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Still to come, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pleads for an end to Russia's war against Ukraine. This during his address to the United Nations General Assembly. Democrat Adalita Grijalva wins the special election for her late father's House seat in Arizona, shrinking the already tiny GOP majority. She joins me live.
It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
President Trump's scathing attack on climate change at the UN still reverberating across the globe. Former Washington Governor Jay Inslee responds. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to The Takeout. It's Climate Week, and that issue taking on more significance and getting a lot more attention after President Trump used his UN address to take some off-ramps and attack all efforts globally to consider or combat climate change. Listen.
It's climate change. Because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, there's climate change. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. I'm telling you that if you don't get away from the green energy scam, your country is going to fail. The carbon footprint is a hoax made up by people with evil intentions.
Joining me now, former Democratic governor in the state of Washington, Jay Inslee. He is the head of the accountability project, The Cost of Trump, for an organization called Climate Power. Governor, it's great to see you, as always. You heard the speech. The floor is yours.
Well, listen, when you've been a governor who has seen whole towns burn down in my state because of climate-induced forest fires, when you've talked to families whose homes have been repeatedly flooded because of these deluges, when you see the children who lost their lives in the Texas flooding, when you know that virtually everywhere in the United States we now are being impacted by this horrendous beast, to see an American president of the country that sent a man to the moon be so oblivious, so ludicrously ignorant about the clear science, it's really shocking on a personal basis. Look, I've talked to these families who are standing in the ashes of their home caused by these massive forest fires that we're experiencing. Los Angeles was not the only one. It's a sad day for the country, and frankly, it's embarrassing. But you know, it's interesting, but the cost of this ignorance is a cost for our pocketbooks as well, because this man is causing us to have rapidly expanding electrical rates all across the country because he's choking off the source of clean energy and making it so that we have higher electrical prices. These $100 spikes in electrical prices are caused because of his ridiculous conspiracy to be in bed with the fossil fuel industry and take care of his buddies who've given him billions or millions of dollars of campaign contributions. So in many respects, it's a sad day for America, but the good news, Americans are an innovative, optimistic people. This is a speed bump. We're going to get through this as soon as we can.
Governor, Energy Secretary Chris Wright was on CBS Mornings Plus today, and he announced that his department is returning $13 billion that had been slated for green energy subsidies. Here's how he described and defended that move. I want you to listen.
With solar and wind and electric vehicles, which is where most of the money has gone, They've just barely gotten to 3% of United States energy and 2.5% of global energy. So it's just been a massive malinvestment. We've made electricity more expensive. We've pushed industries and jobs out of our country, haven't moved the needle on global greenhouse gas emissions. It has been, as the president said, I think he rightfully characterizes it as a scam.
Jay, you just heard him say green energy raises utility prices, sends jobs out of the country. That's exactly opposite what you just told me. So I want you to respond.
I have never heard a bunch of more baloney coming out of a secretary in American history. Look, 90%, over 90% of the new energy that has been developed in the last 3 or 4 years has been clean energy. And the reason for this is that new sources of energy, solar and wind, and also advanced battery, is cheaper than coal power, cheaper with a capital C. I don't know what it is that these people don't understand. Here's what I understand. They're just trying to protect their buddies who's given them millions of dollars. Solar and wind is cheaper than coal, and in many cases, in most cases, in gas in this country. So strictly on an economic basis, what they are doing is taking away the cheaper energy by canceling these wind turbine projects that are like 80 or 90% complete. What could be dumber economically than stopping something that's already 80% complete? And that's including in the Northwest, where they've taken away our wind power projects that are more competitive. And the people who are getting an advantage of this idiocy are, frankly, China, because these are jobs that we ought to have here in building these new energy technologies. We have two of the most advanced battery companies in the world in Washington State. We want to build these jobs here, but in fact, he is sending them to China. So the facts are stubborn things, and the fact is that 90% of the new energy, because we have cheap energy and renewable energy, is because of the economics of this circumstances, forgetting for the moment that the polluting industries are causing massive health impacts. Listen, I met a 12-year-old girl a few years ago who said that she didn't know some kids didn't have asthma because she's living close to a freeway. This is a health issue. It is an economic issue, and is a generational morality issue that we owe our kids better than this. So for many respects, but here's the good news, states can move. My state has moved. We've adopted the Climate Commitment Act. It was affirmed by a 62 to 38% landslide last year, even though the fossil fuel industry went after it. The states are making progress here. All is not lost. We're moving forward in my state and about 24 other states.
As he frequently does, Jay Inslee name checks Washington as often as he possibly can. Former governor, Democrat from Washington. Jay, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for your time.
You bet. Be well.
Coming up, Congresswoman-elect Adalita Grijalva. That's a brand new title. She joins me to discuss what her win in Arizona might mean for the future of the Epstein files. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. We'll get to our guests on the big screen in a second. First, a little bit of news. The Republicans' narrow majority in the House of Representatives came a bit tighter last night. Why? Well, Democrat Adalita Grijalva won the special election for the Arizona House seat previously held by her late father, Raul Grijalva. Raul Grijalva died earlier this year after a very long battle with cancer. Representative-elect Adalita Grijalva joins me now. Once sworn in, interesting to note, she will become the first Latina to represent the state of Arizona in Congress. Congresswoman-elect, it's good to see you. You have to forgive me. I'm a pesky, meaning annoying reporter hung up on logistics. So 2 questions off the top. When do you expect to be sworn in? And are you committed to running for re-election?
I don't know when I'm going to get sworn in because we have to wait until Congress is in session. So right now it's scheduled for October 7th. And if it goes the way of my colleague in Illinois, was just recently elected in a special, he was elected on Tuesday and sworn in on Wednesday. And so my hope would be that it would be that very first day that that Congress is back in session. But that is up to the leader. And so I don't know what Johnson is going to do, 1. And 2, yes, I'm going to run for re-election.
So as you well know, Congresswoman-elect, there's a showdown here in Washington looming. If you are sworn in time, how do you expect to participate in that? And how do you believe that ought to play out?
Well, I don't know that I will be, because unless Johnson calls for votes on the 29th or 30th, then there will be a shutdown that, October 1, and we won't be in session again until October 7th. So I don't know, other than the Democrats being present, and Leader Jeffries has called Democrats to Washington on the 29th to be ready to work and to show our commitment to coming up with a solution that does not involve a shutdown. It's basically in Leader Johnson's hands at this point.
Would you come to Washington on the 29th of September to offer moral support?
Yes, I would.
Very good. I want to ask you. So it's been my understanding that you would sign the discharge petition pending to release the Epstein files. That's sponsored by Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky, and other members of the House caucus on both sides, Republican and Democrat. I want to play for you something that Jamie Comer, who's the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, told me recently in an interview about that discharge petition and the work his committee is doing. Please listen.
That's the thing that's frustrating about this whole Epstein. Everybody would need to do the Massey discharge petition. The Oversight Committee is way ahead of what the Massey discharge petition. The Massey discharge petition doesn't say anything about subpoenaing the estate. We subpoenaed the estate. That's where you got all that trove of information last week that included the birthday card and all the other stuff that people made. We did that. We asked for the bank violations. The Trump administration is cooperating with our investigation. I think we're a lot further along than people realize.
Congresswoman-elect, your response to the chairman of the Oversight Committee.
I think it's important to note that the Republican Party, and Trump specifically during the election, said, day one, I'm going to release the Epstein files, so we know. And we don't know why that hasn't happened, other than the fact that there must be something in there that Trump doesn't want us to see. And so it is all about transparency. And when we, as a Congress, push for a vote that Johnson doesn't want us to take, I think that it's important to note, you have to wonder why. And so respectfully, we don't know what's being held back. And the victims in this case deserve their day of justice. And those that are implicated deserve to have consequences, legal consequences for their conduct. This is really about making sure that the victims of these sexual assaults have a voice and are heard.
Immigration matters a great deal to your state and very much to your district that you are about to represent in Congress. We opened the show with yet another violent attack at an ICE facility, this time in Dallas. When your constituents ask you about immigration and threats to ICE personnel, what position will you take? What actions will you take in Congress to protect those enforcing federal immigration laws?
Well, it's not just about those who are enforcing immigration law. I literally see ICE agents masked completely without any detail, just wearing black, combat clothing in an unmarked vehicle, walking up to people and taking them and forcing them into their cars. It looks like a kidnapping, and we don't know if it is or isn't. And so you have reactions from people because we have ICE agents that are not introducing themselves, not talking about who they are and what they're looking for, and using really deceptive means in order to get into people's homes and trying to round up people that have not committed a crime. And so we have people that are defending other community members because they think they're legitimately being kidnapped. So I think that there has to be rules that are followed. And right now, ICE is just free to do whatever they think, round up whomever they want, make decisions on whether something is a crime or not. I mean, it just depends on the city and the state that you're in, what the rules are. And there need to be uniform rules across the board. And then I believe that once the community understands that we need to unmask ICE agents, and we need to make sure that everyone is held accountable to their conduct.
Congresswoman-elect, I want to be sure I understand you. Are you saying the tactics you just described are bringing on the violence against ICE facilities?
It is bringing on the defensive nature of communities to want to take care of each other. So when you have people that are coming into our communities that are not announcing themselves, that are intimidating people, going onto tribal sovereign land right around the Tohono Nation and following residents of that community and not identifying themselves or who they are, that's where you have people that are frightened and they're concerned. And we're also not talking about the death of someone that was being detained by ICE. So you have all over the board, we have a lot of real corruption happening through ICE in our communities, and our communities are feeling attacked. So I don't condone any violence, but I do think that we have to hold people accountable, and they should talk about who they're looking for, why they're looking for the individual, and minimally announce themselves and who they are.
Representative-elect Adalita Grijalva, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warns at the UN that Russia could widen its war. More on that next when we come back. This is The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here is a look at what else we, and now you, are watching this evening. New details on the FBI raid at John Bolton's office last month. In documents released Tuesday, the FBI said it found classified material at President Trump's former national security advisor's downtown Washington office during an operation, if you might recall, August 22nd. A description suggested the documents touched on weapons of mass destruction, the U.S. mission to the United Nations, and U.S. government communications. Hundreds of federal employees who lost their jobs in Elon Musk's DOGE cuts are being asked, listen to this, to return to work. The General Services Administration, which oversees all this sort of stuff, has given staff until the end of this week to accept or decline reinstatement. According to reporting from the Associated Press, those who take their jobs back will receive what amounts to 7 months of paid vacation. To the United Nations now, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the General Assembly, and he warned that Russia, from his vantage point, wants to expand the war beyond Ukraine. Listen.
Ukraine is only the first, and now Russian drones are already flying across Europe, and Russian operations are already spreading across countries, and Putin wants to continue this war by expanding it, and no one can feel safe right now.
Olivia Gazis, who joins me now, has been following the latest, and she joins us from the United Nations. Olivia, I'm so very happy to have you with us. In his speech, President Zelensky talked, of course, about Ukraine, but he talked in great detail about Estonia, Moldova, and other parts of the world he believes are now in the threat matrix from the war in Ukraine. Explain.
Absolutely, Major. You're right. When he addressed the General Assembly, he did express some gratitude for President Trump's apparent shift in rhetoric towards Ukraine's likely prospects on the battlefield. But he also painted a bleak and troubling picture, one of international institutions that are ineffective, feckless at helping the world's most vulnerable, saying that citizens are suffering in Sudan, in Gaza, in Syria, and international institutions are standing by without any ability to help. He also, as you showed there, warned that Russia was not limiting its military ambitions to Ukrainian territory. He cited those recent incursions that we saw over NATO airspace over Poland, Romania, Estonia, the Baltics, saying Putin will not stop at Ukraine's borders, and it would be cheaper, he made a business case, to stop him now than to wait for the Russians to develop ever more effective ways of reaching deeper and deeper into NATO territory.
Olivia, as best as you can tell, and I know it's always complicated at a massive story in a massive place like the General Assembly, lots of people buzzing around saying different things, but the president yesterday on social media suggested what appeared to many to be an enormous shift in emphasis and orientation toward the war in Ukraine. And today he called Russia a potential paper tiger in that conflict. What, to the best of your ability, has been the reaction or response there to what they're hearing brand new from the American president?
You're absolutely right that it was sort of an unexpected way for the president to reveal this new apparent mindset. He gave little indication of it during his own remarks to the General Assembly, or even just before meeting with President Zelensky in remarks to the press. Instead, it was on that Truth Social statement where he laid out an entirely different worldview than he apparently had been espousing in the months prior. At first, this was greeted with something like, jubilation by the Ukrainians, by the European officials that I've spoken with here. Now I think that's settled into something like cautious optimism, just because it is not clear whether this is passing rhetoric, whether this is an attempt at provoking President Putin, whether this is actually going to be met with any new material American contributions, which were absent from the statement itself. At the end of the statement, the president did wish both countries well and made no indication that the U.S. was preparing to take any more punitive measures towards the Russians.
Olivia Gazis with the General Assembly right behind her. Thank you so very much for joining us. I appreciate it. The race to be South Carolina's next governor may come down to who receives President Trump's endorsement. I'll speak with one of the Republican contenders, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Yvette, next right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Welcome back to the Conversation Corner. You know how much I love to hang out here. Check your calendar. Yeah, we're still more than a year away from the election to elect South Carolina's next governor, but it is gearing up already to be a very competitive race. The state's lieutenant governor, its attorney general, a state senator, and 2 members of Congress are vying against one another to win the Republican primary, which would almost certainly lead to the governorship. At least that's been the trend line recently. One of those candidates joins me here in the Conversation Corner, South Carolina Lieutenant Governor Pamela Yvette. Yvette, is that correct?
Yvette.
Yvette, thank you. Pamela, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me. What distinguishes you in this race, and what would you do if elected governor differently than Henry McMaster, the current governor?
So what distinguishes me is that I've spent the majority of my life in the business sector. I started a business, created that into a national company, and then left my business to serve with the governor. I'm the first lieutenant governor ever elected with a governor. So Governor McMaster and I are dear friends, and we work hand in glove, and he's asked me to serve with him 2 terms. And so I think that distinguishes me from everybody else. I'm not a career politician. I've signed the front of paychecks. I've balanced budgets. I've created jobs. And I think that's what we're seeing. In South Carolina, the momentum and trend is they want a business governor, somebody that's been able to do all these things.
I know polling at this stage of a race is not very helpful, but there's one poll. Nancy Mace, who's been on the show, 19%, you 18%, AG Alan Wilson 16%, 35% undecided. What's the state of the race for the primary?
Yeah, it's primary, right? This race will be decided in the primary. That's the way it's been in South Carolina.
By President Trump.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I'm very proud. You know, President Trump is the one that kind of inspired me to leave my business and run, right? I was a Trump supporter when I was sitting at my desk going, we need something else in government. And so, you know, in January of 23, when the president came to South Carolina to talk about running again, out of all the people that has thrown their hat in the race for governor, I'm the only one that stood with him because I really believed he was what the nation needed. And I worked really hard. I've traveled all around the state, traveled to New Hampshire with him, raised a lot of money for him in his 2020 and 2024 race. And so, you know, and I'm very proud of what he's done. And I think he's inspired a lot of business people to get out of their comfort zone and take their knowledge into the public sector and try to make government better.
Does this primary come down to who he endorses?
I think a big chunk of it, South Carolina, it's a Trump state, and you know we saw that. We had 2 South Carolinians vied to run against him for president, and President Trump, you know, heavy-handedly took the state by storm. And so I think people listen and look, and that the governor is really impactful in the state. He's a very popular governor. He took us through COVID very well, and the state has been thriving under our administration.
If he's watching, what's your pitch?
To the president, you know, I'm your person. I've been loyal and I've been there for you, and I love everything you do. And I want to take the things that you're doing, making America great, and bring it right to South Carolina.
I want to ask you about what's going on at Clemson. It has fired 2 faculty members and 1 staff member over social media posts related to the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
How do you come down on that? And do you have any concern that this kind of firing for social media posts separate from what their actual job is infringes on free speech?
You know, I don't think there's anybody that can argue that the foundation of this nation is free speech and we should have it. But I'm a business person. And when somebody's free speech starts to intersect and hurt your company, your brand, those are 2 separate things. There's consequences. Harm. That's right. There's consequences, right? And at Clemson, my son goes there. And I was very outspoken. I know the president of the college very well. Him and I talked about this. I didn't just run out to social media. What I am upset with is that I hear over and over again from my children, my children's friends. I have 3 children, from nieces and nephews. It keeps building. How many kids, he'll say, go and ask students on college campuses how many times they've had to write a paper or talk in a tone or a tense that they don't agree with for fear of retribution by a professor. So when we
fear of a bad grade or worse.
Exactly. So when we talk about this, why are we always so worried about protecting the professor and not the kids that, you know, are sitting in a classroom that a lot of parents and a lot of kids feel like they're trying to be indoctrinated? Why aren't we using colleges to cultivate critical thinking? You know, when I was in college, my best professors could argue both sides of a point, and I could walk out of that lecture and never knowing what their point of view was. And that's what we have to get back to, teaching critical thinking. So
how does that embrace of critical thinking factor through your evaluation of Jimmy Kimmel?
So, you know, again, I'm a business person. Was that firing, you know, coming because as a business decision by Disney that his ratings weren't what they should have been? Was it outrage from markets that even now with him coming back on, there are markets that
It appears to have been
saying,
influenced by the FCC chairman.
But was that, you know, from what I've read, and again, this is just by what, you know, what I've read, is that they were mostly calling him out for some of the remarks he made saying that the shooter was MAGA. So it was a lie, not so much what he said, but you can't lie about what you're saying. And I thought that's kind of where the push came from. And I think we have to be careful when we get out there and we say things. I think this rhetoric, I really was kind of offended, like everybody saying, you know, both sides need to tone down the rhetoric. When I clearly saw Democrats over the years, you know, Maxine Waters coming out and saying, if you see MAGA people, if you see Republicans, get in their face, make them uncomfortable, push them out of public places. I mean, that is really violent rhetoric, and we've consistently seen that coming from the Democrats. I never saw, when those Minnesota lawmakers were killed, I never saw one Republican rejoice in that. When it came to, you know, recognizing them on the House floor, the Democrats and the Republicans united to come together to say, yes, we should, you know, acknowledge that this horrible incident happened. We saw Democrats that wouldn't, you know, give any consideration to Charlie Kirk. And I think that, you know, we can't lump us all in together. You have to call out bad behavior. And I think we have to be fair when we call that out.
And you only see it on the left.
Yeah, I haven't really seen much of it. I'm not calling for violent acts. I've not seen that. Now, I'm not saying I've seen every Republican across the country in what they've said, but I've really seen a big uptick in calling Republicans a threat to democracy, calling our president a Nazi. That just incites and moves people who may be suffering from mental health issues. So I think the rhetoric needs to be toned down, and I hope the Democrats are learning from this horrible incident.
South Carolina Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette.
Yes.
Thank you. And a note to our audience, we have extended invitations to everyone else on the Republican side running for governor in South Carolina. Maybe they'll show up, maybe they won't, but that's up to them. Looking for the truth in Afghanistan, harder than you think. We take a look at a new documentary that exposes years and years and years of falsehoods from the U.S. government related to 2 decades of war there. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. A new documentary on Paramount Plus highlights efforts running through 4 different presidential administrations, Republican, Democrat, to hide the difficulties and failures the U.S. faced and dealt with or didn't deal with in the war in Afghanistan. Bodyguard of Lies, brought to you by See It Now Studios, relies on confidential documents, testimony from insiders, and never-before-seen footage. Let's take a look.
How do you prove that someone's not telling the truth?
How does it feel being out here in Afghanistan?
Everybody says in public we're winning the war, but over there it's clear we're not winning. At the low level, it's all bad news, and by the time it comes out the top at the Pentagon or the White House, it's all rosy.
We're making good progress.
We are seeing significant progress.
Okay, everybody smile. It's not that you're lying, but you're going to paint a pretty good picture on the pig.
We are not losing it.
Are you saying that you are winning?
Everything changed with a tip about an interview that the government didn't want it getting out.
If we're doing such a great job, why does it feel like we're losing?
We found out there were hundreds of other interviews like this. 6 months into the war, Donald Rumsfeld saying, help, how do we get out of here? We're never going to get out. Narrative was completely at odds with what the public had been told.
So many people said we're losing. I wish some of them had said it, publicly.
The sense of progress among those closest to the fight is palpable.
Our strategy is working. The only thing that's classified in this town is bad news. There's an odor of mendacity throughout the Afghanistan issue.
John Sopko, appointed by President Obama in 2012 to serve as the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, joins me now. John, it's a pleasure to have you. The ravages of time have made this segment with you and me tighter than I would prefer. So I'm going to promise you and the audience I'm going to have you back because this is a deeply important conversation. But in the 3 minutes or so we have, much less than I would have preferred originally, walk my audience through the essence of this story.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope we get a chance to talk more about it. The essence of the story is basically the American people were misled over the last 10, 12 years, 20 years. I was there for 12 years working on this. Everybody came in and said, we're turning the corner, we're winning. And it turned out if you had actually been out there, you talked to the people, if you had read any of the 700 reports that my office created, you would have realized we were losing bad. And it wasn't just the agreement with the Taliban that the Trump administration first did, or Biden's withdrawal. We were going downhill years ago, and everybody knew it.
Why, when everyone knew it, did they continue to go out and say things that they couldn't back up?
Well, if you want to get a promotion in this town, if you wanted to get a contract, and there are a lot of contracts, you had to say, you had to follow the line. We're winning. We're working. We're working well. The Afghans are doing a great job. Everybody was gilding the lily here. If you wanted to get a promotion, you wouldn't come in and tell Congress or tell your bosses, we're losing. And I think that we built in a system, and that's the problem. And that's why I think people should look at Afghanistan, not because of where the war was, but how the U.S. government does business. We gave our soldiers, we gave our aid officers, we gave our ambassadors and all that a box of broken tools. And one of them is this appropriation cycle where you have to show success. And the other one is the personnel system where people had short rotations. So, I mean, there were many problems that led to this disaster.
John, 30 seconds. I know many veterans of Afghanistan who were bitter about this, downstream effects of this failure.
Oh, downstream effects is not just the Americans who were suffering, but all of the Afghans that cooperated with us. They basically are left in the lurch now. I mean, that's one of the worst things. I mean, as an American, and knowing many of these people, and I'm not just talking about Afghan troops, I'm talking about the judges, the prosecutors, the reporters, Afghan reporters who believed in us. They're all stuck. We've stopped all.
John, I got to go. I promise you we will redo this conversation in a longer format. You have my word. Thank you very much. You can stream Bodyguard of Lies now on Paramount+. Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. You know what we're about? We're relentlessly curious, reliably civil, and occasionally clever. The Daily Report starts now.